What is up guys, welcome back to another video, and in this video I'm going to talk about walking. And it's kind of crazy that walking has become this alien thing. Okay, in our attempts to try and move better, in our attempts to move without pain, to resolve injury and just understand what our bodies need in order to be able to move freely and effortlessly, we've completely overlooked the importance of walking in all of this. And I think using walking as a resource and using it as almost a diagnostic to be able to understand why you may be experiencing pain, I think it's crazy that we don't use this in our mainstream approaches. And our mainstream approaches of exercise, where it's like, let's focus on muscle, let's just focus on body composition, let's brace everything and let's lift as much as we can. It's actually destroying our ability to do the one thing that sets us apart from all other animals, all other species on Earth, is the ability to walk and move in a balanced way on 2 feet, on 2 limbs. And I think walking in many ways is like breathing. We take it for granted and we take it as something that is a given and almost as something that we can't do badly or wrong or in a way we're not designed to. And it's just like our breathing. When we develop poor breathing habits and breathing patterns, this can have a huge systemic impact and effect on the health of our bodies. And it's the exact same with walking. From a musculoskeletal standpoint and a pain standpoint, how you walk will determine largely how your body's going to feel in the long run and your susceptibility to injuries. And for me, moving effortlessly, moving pain-free, all comes back to being able to move through the gait cycle, move through our walk and our run, because it carries directly over, to be able to do that efficiently and effortlessly and without pain. Okay, and we're going to talk about a couple of key things. We're going to break down the walking cycle. We're going to break down that developmental process from when we were kids to now when we're adults, and what that process of going from the ground, not being able to walk, to being able to sprint at high speeds. And we're going to highlight a couple of key things that indicate how far in general our population has gotten away from the ability to be able to walk and understand the importance of that. And one final note before we start jumping into it is, walking serves as a reminder to us that our bodies have an ingrained code, a blueprint for how we're supposed to move. We're set up and built in a certain way that we've evolved to have and adopted over hundreds of thousands of years. Our geometry, our body, our mechanics is all set up to allow us to move in very specific ways and in optimal ways. And for me, using this blueprint as a goal, as a marker for something to return to if we've started to move away from it, is an extremely powerful thing that I think a lot of people overlook, and a lot of people can actually completely change how they move by doing that. So let's get into it. Let's start breaking down some key elements of the walk and how we can optimize it. And I'm going to finish off by showing you a couple of key drills that you can start doing straight away and feel it in your body for yourself. So let's get into it. So I think the first important thing to understand here is, what are the patterns of movement that we need to see in our walk? And how did we get to having the ability to be able to walk from when we were babies to when we're adults? And if you think back, nobody taught you how to walk. You had that pattern ingrained in your DNA from when you were a baby. You may have had your parents or other people around you who encouraged you to walk, but nobody actually taught you how to walk, how to move your joints. And we learn how to walk by first learning how to crawl. The patterns that we see in crawling of rotation, of how our limbs set up when we hit the floor, how we absorb impact and how we transfer that to the opposite side. And that all starts at birth. That pattern is ingrained and we start to explore that as babies, and we start to develop and build our strength and ability at that before eventually progressing to being assisted in standing positions and then learning how to walk. So the first thing that you can do to get back to start restoring your ability to move through the gait cycle effortlessly is to return to crawling patterns. And I've created a video in the past about crawling that you can check out. It's going to give you some insights on what you can start doing to start to restore that global rotation and relative motions within your body. So once we've started hitting that first milestone and started to learn those patterns of rotation in our crawling, we can then take it into standing and into walking. And before we do that, I think it's really important to understand that in our mainstream, we define walking as a series of controlled falls. And we look at walking from a very one-dimensional perspective. I would say that walking is neither a series of controlled falls, it's actually a series of balanced steps. And I would also say that it does not happen in one dimension or one plane of motion. It happens in all three planes simultaneously. And I think if we focus on looking at these two key definitions and breaking them down, we're going to understand, number one, how it's actually led to problems that most people experience. And number two, it gives us the roadmap back to be able to move effortlessly again and move fluidly and start walking with the mechanics we were designed to walk with. So if we look at the first mainstream definition of walking, that it's a series of controlled falls, and break that down. Our mainstream gym culture and movement culture tells us that we need to brace our core and we need to stay strong here and not move, and then start pushing weight and start doing things in a way where we really resist the movement in our spine. And if we take that into walking and keep a strong, steady spine that doesn't move, then walking becomes a series of controlled falls because we can't transfer our weight from one side to the other. And that's basically what walking is. It's a transfer of weight to one leg, and then it's a transfer of weight to the other leg. But it becomes very hard to become balanced and actually transfer if I can't rotate my spine, okay? It becomes, we constantly try and catch ourselves as we fall. And it's this constant motion of trying to hold on and not fall over. And that leads to a lot of tension in our bodies, okay? If we're constantly falling, our body's priority is to stay upright. So in order to stay upright, we need to brace, and we need to hold, contract, tighten everything, and just move through the world like this. And we become very robotic in our movements. Our feet just start slamming into the floor, and we never really get away from center. We place our right foot, but I never actually get there because I'm so steady here. And then I step and I'm so steady. And we start slamming into the floor. Our feet now, we start loading in on the inside edge and collapsing inwards because we can't get rotation that turns us onto this side. So I challenge that definition of walking and would say that walking is actually a loading in to one side of our body and then a push out and a loading in to the other side of our body. And doing this in a way that's balanced, that's relaxed, and that's effortless. Because if we want to be able to move effortlessly, if we want to be able to relax tension in our body, we need to be balanced. That means we're not holding ourselves anymore, we're stacked, and our joints can now do the work, and all the softer tissues like our muscles and connective tissues can now start to relax and distribute that force evenly. So yes, if you walk with the mainstream advice of keeping a rigid spine, then you will be doing a series of controlled falls. But if you allow rotation in your body and you allow that transfer of force from one side to the other, now walking becomes very smooth and very effortless. So that's takeaway number one from walking, is that it's not a series of controlled falls. It's actually a series of loading one side and transferring and loading to the other side in a balanced way, which leads to fluid movement. And this leads me on to the second main misconception that's out there about walking and movement, and that is that it's happening in one plane of motion. When we tend to analyze movement in our mainstream approach, we analyze it from our side view and we look at how much is my hip extending, how much is it flexing, and we don't understand that it's actually happening in all three planes of motion at once. And understanding that movement is happening in more than one plane at any one time leads back to the idea of it's not a series of controlled falls. Because if we move in one plane of motion at a time and we're not actually understanding that we move in all three planes of motion at the same time, then it becomes very hard to achieve that balance we want to have. It becomes very hard to transfer our weight in balanced ways between sides. And so generally, when someone is experiencing pain and stiffness in their movement and some kind of injury that they can't get rid of, it's generally because we are holding ourselves in rigid shapes, because we don't allow that free-flowing, three-dimensional spiral motion to happen in our body with every step we take. And that's why I believe walking is so powerful, because each step you take can either be helping you to move better and feeding quality movement nutrition into your system, or it's actually causing you to move one step closer towards that overload injury, that chronic tightness and pain that you can't get rid of. And if we allow fluid movement to happen within our system and express that three-dimensional complex nature we have, then we can resolve a lot of the chronic musculoskeletal injuries that we experience. And if we can understand those mechanics and take that into the gym and into the training that we do, that can have very powerful effects in the long run. So the last thing I want to do is break down some of the mechanics of how we walk and show you a couple of things you can do to start integrating those mechanics. So when we take a step, what we would want to happen is, as I step forward, I need to side bend and rotate my spine to that side. What this is doing is allowing me to internally rotate on my standing front side leg, and it's also allowing me to drop back into my hip and access this back chain. That gets me strong on the outside edge of my foot and sends that force into the areas that we want to have it. When I get to this position where I drop back into my hip and I've rotated my body to this side, my head is now stacked over my leg. And as I go on into my next step, I'm now set up because I want to be balanced so I can take this leg off the floor and then transition it to the opposite side. And then the same thing happens. I come through and I get side bend and rotation to my opposite side, and I get that internal rotation on my left as I start to push out of my right and turn my entire body weight to this side. And now my head is aligned here. Now I'm balanced, and now I can step again, and then I can get back to the other side. And you can see how that movement is not really allowed to happen in a rigid spine, because I never get into my right side step and I never get into my left side. I'm constantly in the middle and I'm just stepping my feet onto the floor. So what we need to do is allow this figure 8 spiral motion to happen in our spine. And the best way I've found to integrate this in and relearn this is to actually start exaggerating it just that little bit more. Because when we walk, if we were to do this normally, we will see some rotation, and that is happening. But in order for it to happen on a natural basis, we need to first exaggerate and teach that range of motion. So one way I really like to do this is by taking my hand and think of drawing figure 8s with my hands. So what that looks like is I cross my hands at the front, I'm going to step my foot. So as I step, I need to get down into this hip. So I want to think of side bending and rotating and sending my elbow to my back pocket here. And my elbow on the opposite side now comes up and forward and is pointing me in the direction that I want to go. So as I step, I drop into this side, my head stays on the horizon, and as I step across, I drop into the other side. And we start to develop this more fluid motion, and we can start to increase our speed. Okay, so we really want to exaggerate that. So elbows high, drawing figure 8s. Okay, slow it down, and then you can start to increase that motion. And then do this over a period of a couple of meters. What you want to do is start with the exaggerated and then just relax it, and now just let the arms and the shoulders and everything happen. And we're slowly starting to integrate that pattern of when I step my foot forward, I drop into this side and I get my body weight here, because now instead of it being a series of controlled falls, it becomes our series of balanced transfers of weight from one side to the other. And that's what happens in crawling, where we get that side bend from side to side through our spine, that coiled rotation and side bend, and then we take that into our walking, and then eventually we can take that pattern into our run. So guys, there's some thoughts on walking. Okay, I could probably go on forever to talk about walking, but I hope that this at least gives you a good introduction into the power that walking can have on our ability to move effortlessly and without pain, because that's the goal. Our body wants to conserve energy. If our only mode of moving through the world is to walk or to run, then from an evolutionary standpoint and from an ancestral standpoint, our body wants to optimize for the efficiency of that, to conserve energy. So allowing this recycling, reciprocating motion to happen through allowing rotation within our system in all three planes, that's the most efficient way of recycling energy. Because if it becomes the series of controlled falls, then we're constantly falling to the floor, we need to decelerate, and then we need to somehow pull ourselves back and do it all again on the opposite side. But if we allow the rotation to start happening, then that's when it becomes effortless. So let me know if you want to see deeper dives on walking and the power that that can have, and how you can practically employ this in your training. Because when I started to learn this and I started applying the principles of walking, which would be natural human movement, into my training, that's when movements started becoming more efficient. That's when my movements started to become more painless. And that's when I stopped picking up a constantly sore left knee or a constantly tight right ankle. Because now, instead of giving in to my compensations and reinforcing that bad movement pattern that was overloading the specific areas with every step I took, now I started to use the movement as a therapy, and I'm actually getting quality reps in with every step I take in my day, and not just focusing on my half an hour or my 60 minutes in the gym. I'm moving with quality all the time, and it starts simply by reinforcing those natural patterns. So let me know below if you want to see more videos like this, if you want to see deeper dives on walking and how you can apply it into your training and use the principles of natural movement to really restore your ability to move well every single day, every single step you take. And it's a really fascinating topic, and it's something that can really change your perspective and change how you approach your training. So that's it for this one, guys. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one, and I hope that you have a great week.